And welcome back to another edition of the Michael Decon program, reporting to you live from Hell Central, California, deep inside of a boiler room. That's right. That is where you'll find me. First time listeners out there, it's a pleasure to meet you. This show is much better than a fatal accident. Joining me tonight, my guest is none other than Mr. Richard Syrett. Now, without further ado, let's bring him right in. Richard, how are you?
Hey, Michael, I'm well, thanks.
I'm glad you're here, and I wasted no time with that intro. I'm sorry if I took too much time there.
No worries, no worries. Good to be with you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for being here yet again, and we have so much to cover here. And we usually do, but before we get into that, how was your Halloween?
Pretty quiet, actually. We decorated. My boys are. This is the first year they're not trick or treating.
Right.
They're 14. They've moved on, so that chapter is over, which I'll miss. We had a lot of good times and good memories, but just because of the fear, I guess, of COVID, there were virtually no trick or treaters out on the streets. So my wife and I went for a brief walk in the cold, damp weather. And yeah, that was pretty much it. We saw some scary movies on Blu-ray, and I think we enjoyed a bowl of popcorn, and that was about it. How about yours?
It was pretty much the same, except I have no kids and nobody was trick-or-treating. That is definitely a thing of the past, and that makes me kind of sad. By the way, how are your kids handling the whole COVID situation?
I think they're doing extremely well. I'm proud of them. Kids are pretty resilient, and we have tried to maintain a degree of normalcy here. Prior to they just started high school this year. Prior to that, they were homeschooled for 4 years. So they're kind of used to home life.
Right.
They kind of like it. They relish it, actually. So they're going to school 2 days a week in the morning. Other than that, it's pretty much steady as she goes. They continue to play tennis, and I guess that's pretty much it. They do enjoy their friends on on Zoom, and they play video games and so forth. But yeah, they're managing quite well. I'm proud of them.
Very good, very good. And everything's going well for you, I assume, with the wife.
Terrific. No, everything's wonderful. Thank you.
I'm glad everything's going well. Now, as we continue along, I did want to go over your background here for those newer listeners at home who might not be familiar with you. So, from my understanding, you enrolled in which college was it again? The Centennial, right?
Yes, I went to Centennial College for radio and television back in 1989, graduated in 92.
And at that time, which bands were you listening to, Richard?
Which bands?
Yeah, what kind of music were you listening
Oh,
to?
I guess I've always been kind of a classic rock guy. So, Dylan, The Doors, and The Dead, the three Ds, as we used to call them, but the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, you name it. Uh, the 80s were kind of a difficult period for me musically because there was a lot of the British pop was very popular, a lot of electronic music, synthesizers, and that sort of thing. And my headspace, I was still kind of stuck in the 60s.
I see.
So
So no bands of that era caught your attention.
I'm trying to think.
Nothing stands out.
I guess maybe Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, although
Okay.
they'd been around late 70s. There were a few bands I think that kind of captured that classic rock vibe, if you will. Of course, Aerosmith was still very active in the 80s. So there were a few bands, but nothing that were sort of coming out of the 80s specifically. Some of the bands like the Psychedelic Furs or Joy Division. I'm trying to think of some of the names. I used to hear these bands. Someone would have them playing at parties and so forth, but it never appealed to me, that music. Now when I hear it now, there's a bit of a nostalgia just because it takes me back to a particular time, but I had no affinity for the musical groups.
Understood. And in the banner that I used for our interview here, people can see that in the chat room, and it's of you, Richard, and you look like a young Bon Jovi. Great hair.
Oh, thank you. Well, I still have my hair, thank God, knock wood.
There you go.
Yeah, I guess just good genes. I have all my hair and no gray so far.
Right. And of course, after you graduated, you started working for CFRB AM 1010.
That's right. A 50,000 watt AM station that first went on the air in 1927. It's a real legacy station. It has a remarkable history, and I was very fortunate. I worked there sort of. I want to say the tail end of the glory days of AM radio. We had an incredible lineup in those days. Wally Crowder was the morning man. He was, I believe, and still is in the Guinness Book of World Records, longest serving morning man in radio history. We had just an incredible lineup of great broadcasters, and I had the benefit of learning from all of them. I was a producer at that time, and then in the late 90s, the program director asked me to do my own show on Sunday nights. I guess it was 2000, actually, February 2000, and that's when my broadcasting career really took off.
Yeah, definitely. That experience really shaped the rest of your career, no doubt. And I didn't realize how popular that radio station truly was until just recently when I was doing some research on you, Richard. I was blown away.
CFRB was, in Toronto, that everybody, my mother, my grandparents listened to CFRB. It was appointment tuning. Now, keep in mind, there was in the glory days of CFRB, say the 1940s, 50s, 60s, there was before FM radio, before cable television. It was the destination to go for news and information and entertainment, and there wasn't the competition that there is today by any stretch. But one of the probably, I would say, one of the top dozen stations in North America in terms of its influence and uh, um, its market share. Even when I worked there in the 90s, it was a 10 share, which is almost unthinkable for an AM station today.
No doubt. No doubt. Most people, if they're curious, look into that radio station, CFRB AM 1010. And again, at this point, that's when you, I believe, also started working as a professor, correct? Around that time.
That came
Slowly after.
actually quite a
Shortly
bit
after,
later.
rather. Yeah.
I was asked to teach some radio broadcasting courses at a community college in, I think it was the fall of 2012 or 2013, something like that. So I taught some broadcasting, writing for broadcast, and some other courses at Durham College in Oshawa.
Yeah, that just popped into my mind, or head rather. I was thinking you were also a professor for a short time.
Yeah, Durham College, and then for I guess a couple years, and then I taught for a semester at Humber College in the broadcasting program as well.
Very nice. And Richard, what got you interested in talk radio at all? Was there a certain show or
Well,
host? What was it?
yeah, I'd have to say my actual initial game plan after graduation was to pursue a career in television documentary. I had done an internship at a documentary house, a TV doc house in Toronto, and quite liked it. And I thought that's what I was going to do. And after my internship ended, I received a call from a classmate who was working at CFRB. I think she was in the newsroom, and she said that the station was looking for a call screener, which is what they call an on-air producer. They're the ones that responsible for lining up the calls for a talk show. And so I applied, got in, and I started working with Ed Needham, who was he was a fabulous broadcaster. He was an American. He was a real what they call a bloviator. He was very opinionated. He had an American sensibility. He rubbed a lot of the Canadian audience the wrong way. People either loved him or hated him, but he was terrific, and I learned a lot from him. And he was the type of broadcaster who he didn't need guests. He didn't even need calls. If he wanted to sit behind the microphone and talk for 3 hours, he could do it. And he had such amazing life experiences, and he was very compelling to listen to. So that was sort of my entree into talk radio, and I found him to be so engaging and compelling that I thought, wow, there's something to this talk radio. And from there, I started working with John Oakley, who at that time was doing a late night overnight show. And he brought in such an amazing cast of interesting characters and guests. And I started working on that show, and that's really, I think, what clinched it for me. It was a magical show. 1 minute he would have I don't know, let's say the mayor of Toronto on, and then in the next half hour there would be someone who claimed that they were a vampire hunter.
Nice.
And then he would bring in it would be a live musical band. It was just it was all over the place, but it was so captivating, and I think that's really when I decided talk radio is really I don't know. I found so much of the musical type programming was so kind of formulaic, and it really didn't appeal to me. I mean, the idea of sitting behind a microphone and queuing up records and reading a rehearsed ad lib and giving a temperature and a time check and backselling the record. It just didn't seem to be anything to that, nothing creative or imaginative.
Right.
And although, having said that, the DJs from the 1960s, those jocks were fantastic, like the Wolfman Jacks.
I agree.
Those guys, and a lot of them, they programmed their own music, but of course that was a bygone era. So for me, in terms of radio, the only thing that interesting that was happening was talk radio. And so I kind of hitched my wagon to John Oakley's Star, and we worked together for over a dozen years. And I followed him around different day parts. From there, he went to 7 to 10, and then he did a mid-morning show. Then he did the drive home show, and then eventually we moved over to another radio station, Mojo Talk Radio for Guys, AM 640, and we started the morning show there, and that was great fun for about 6 months. And then the format changed, and it wasn't so much fun anymore, but I kind of stuck it out for a few years. Then went back to CFRB to do my own show, basically Monday to Friday. It was the same type of program I've been doing really for 20 years.
Very nice, very nice. For me personally, Richard, what got me really interested was the very famous show Loveline. I heard that show growing up on the radio as a kid, and I enjoyed listening to Dr. Drew and Adam Carolla. Sadly, I'm not a fan of either one anymore, but I'm sure they won't lose any sleep over that.
Yeah, I enjoy Adam Carolla. I see him occasionally on Tucker Carlson, and I like his punditry, if you will. I vaguely remember that show. Art Bell, of course, was another huge influence, as he was for many of us. I've always said he had that kind of persona and delivery that I could have listened to him read from the telephone directory.
It was that good. That's true.
Yeah. Yes. Very excellent broadcaster.
And by 2009, you joined Zoomer Radio, that's 740 AM, out of the Great White North, where you reside, my friend. You were already putting out some great shows way before that, and by this time, your career, you're pretty much polished at this time. Then you get the call to become a guest host for Premier Radio. That's in 2014, right?
My first show with Coast to Coast was in April of 2009, and the Toronto affiliate at that time was AM 640, where I had worked previously. It was called Mojo Radio at that point.
Mojo Radio, okay.
Yeah, and when I worked there, and then it became AM 640.
I'm surprised I remembered any of what I just told you right now, even if I got it wrong.
So I hosted one night. I filled in for George Norrie on a Friday night in 2009, and then I didn't hear back from them for 5 years.
Oh wow! Okay.
And I just assumed, okay, so they didn't like my little bag of tricks. That's fine. You know, I can always say I hosted Coast to Coast or guest hosted, and you know, I pretty much moved on to other things. And then in January 2014. The executive producer, Lisa Lyon, called, and it's been pretty steady since then, and going on 7 years, usually 3, sometimes 4 nights a month. I'll fill in as a guest host on a Friday or a Saturday, or occasionally on a Sunday on Coast, and it's an amazing platform and a huge audience, and I'm so fortunate to have that.
No doubt, and I'll circle back to Coast AM in a second here, but before we do, I believe we have a call here for you, Richard. I think they might have a question.
All right.
Caller, you are live on the air. How's it going?
Outstanding. How's it going there, Michael Decon and Richard Syrett?
Hey there.
I have actually, you know, everybody always has their detractors. God knows Art had them. I'm sure Michael has them. I have them on my small YouTube, which I like having. But the thing about it is, you, I think, continues on in a different manner than Art did. You don't have the same deep voice. Your mannerisms are different. But it was such a big improvement from what we saw with George Norrie. And I'd like you to address not like you're down talking George Norrie.
You're never going to get me to do that.
That's true.
George Norrie has been incredibly
George Norrie has
kind
paid his
and
dues,
gracious and supportive, and
yes.
and you know, I wouldn't for a moment entertain any negativity towards Mr. Nori.
No, and I'm not saying to do that. I'm just saying, you added something during your tenure that he didn't have. I don't know if you were less controlled. I guess this is my question. Did you?
I'm sure you get a lot of this, by the way, Richard.
No, actually,
Like
I
you were
don't.
less
I mean,
controlled?
everybody, nobody is trying to be Art Bell. I'm the furthest thing from Art Bell. I got into some hot water because I had a program director at a station who said I'm Canada's Art Bell. He didn't mean literally, I'm as good as Art Bell or I'm the next Art Bell.
You got heat for that, Richard.
A little bit.
Oh my!
He was making a comparison. He's saying Art Bell did what he did, and I'm doing a similar thing in terms of the type of a show, right? And that's all he meant. And so, I use that quote from time to time.
Sure.
Not claiming it for myself, but saying this is what a program director said about me. I'm Canada's Art Bell. It's like an elevator pitch. If you're trying to explain to somebody, well, what's your show about up here in Canada?
Yes.
And so you would say, well, what's the easiest comparison? Well, think about Art Bell or think about Coast to Coast. That's the kind of show I'm doing. We call that the elevator pitch. You compare what you do to something else that they'll know, and then immediately they get it.
Right.
So then all of a sudden, not a lot, but people were saying, "Oh, he thinks he's Art Bell." Of course not. I'm not Art Bell. Never tried to be Art Bell. And everybody who guest hosts on Coast to Coast, whether it's Jimmy Church just finished his tenure there,
he's moved
on to other things. Right.
Right. Mm-hmm.
He had something that he brought that was different. Dave Schrader before him, Lisa Garr, Connie Willis, George Knapp, of course, is a phenomenal broadcaster. Ian Punnett, they all bring something different. That's why they have us on Coast to Coast. Nobody's trying to be Art Bell. And George Nori is he's in the position he's in, and he's been there now almost, I think, closing in on 20 years.
20 years, right.
Because he has a likability and because people identify with him. And they listen to him, and he's like their friend or their uncle or their brother or whatever. And that's that kind of skill. I don't even think you can learn it. You either have it or you don't. And George has it. You can't argue with that kind of success. Now, does he have his detractors? Sure. I have my detractors. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there.
We all do.
Who don't like my act, and that's fine. But as I say, I'm very fortunate to be part of that Coast family, and I admire and respect them all. And we don't get to hang out because I'm in Toronto and they're in LA, or I think Connie's down in Kentucky and Ian Punnett is in Kansas. So we're separate. We're all scattered across the continent. But there is kind of a I don't know. I don't want to overplay it and say a familial bond, but
it seems like you guys are
mutual respect,
right?
And
you guys have a good, friendly rapport. It seems.
Yes. I have nothing but fondness and admiration for all of them.
I honestly wasn't trying to say that George was less than or anything.
That's okay.
I said,
that's okay.
What I was trying to say was you, Ian Punnett, several other people that were on there, excuse me, they were less, there wasn't so much control, and it wasn't from Nori. What I was trying to say was, with George, it seemed like a certain topic, like Art Bell would never tolerate anybody filtering his language. And I know you wouldn't. I also know that Ian Punnett would. You guys brought up some explicit topics and thoughtful topics. But George, there was something that happened once the firing from, now he has Caravan Midnight. I can't think of his name right now.
John B. Wells.
John B. Wells. Once he got fired, George really changed that, and it's not a dig. I'm not trying to dig. I'm not going to detract from any of these. George, and he has his strong points, just like we all do, and we also have our weak points. My question, really, I would have been able to get around to it, which I am now. Thank you, Michael, for this. Did you feel like you were, during your tenure, that was my point, like you were being edited or told, can't talk about this issue, you can talk about these, and that was a real question. And I know it was a big question on Belgab, and I'm sure, Asuka Langley and everybody else who was on Belgab back in the day, we all know, what we thought. And I was just trying to ask honest answer of it. And I don't want you to drag him. I'm not going to drag him either. He is what he is. He's a good dude. I don't think he's anything less than that. And, that was my question. Hopefully I synopsized it better than I did as we were first talking. You have to remember I'm calling in on great Michael Decon program, and I'm probably a little nervous. And this is sword point. Okay?
Well, your question, as to your question, have I ever been told this I can talk about and this I can't talk about? No. In fact, the exact opposite. Coming from Canada, we have, let's just say, we don't have the same love. I don't want to say obsession, but we don't approach freedom of speech in the same way. We simply don't have freedom of speech to the level that they do in the United States. And so actually it was quite the opposite, where I would suggest, or I would say something to Lisa Lyon, the executive producer. Is it okay if I, can I talk about this? And she said, well, why not? And I just found that so refreshing. But I've never throughout my career really been told, you can't talk about this. You can talk about these things. Here's a list of pre-approved topics. That it doesn't happen that way. What might happen is after I do a show, and I'm talking about up here in Canada, not coast to coast. If the program director heard something, or somebody would call and complain, he would ask me about, what was said, what happened. Let me hear this. Let me hear the tape. And then we would discuss, well, how could we have handled that differently? That sort of thing. Because we have to be, one thing I'm always cognizant of, and that is, one of the things I won't talk about is, Holocaust denial. I won't have that on the program. And if people say, well, why not? I don't apologize for it. I don't even discuss it. It's just a hard and fast rule I have. Now, aside from that, it's pretty much anything goes. One of the things I do, and I sort of self-censor on Coast to Coast because I'm a Canadian, and that's largely an American audience. It's an American show, and I feel sometimes like I'm a bit of an interloper. So while I'm a very political person and I have my views, when I'm hosting Coast, I try to stay away from getting too embroiled in politics. Again, simply because I don't think it's appropriate as a Canadian weighing in on U.S. politics. It's probably happened from time to time. I got drawn in a little bit, but for the most part, I try to stay away from it. And the other reason is I think during these times, there's so much divisiveness. I think people look at Coast to Coast as a bit of a they're getting a reprieve from that. It's kind of escapism. It's like, we know about COVID, we know about the election. Can I just have my 4 hours of things that go bump in the night and UFOs and near-death experiences? I sense, rightly or wrongly, that's what the audience wants and that's what they need.
Look, Richard, there, I will tell you right now, you achieved that epically. You were one of the best hosts besides Ian Punnett, and I do have a certain affinity to the other host, but I didn't really want to go in depth on him. But you guys actually did follow what I thought Art did. Art got into politics tangentially. It was not full on. I'm this, I'm that. I think he mentioned he was a Republican one time. In the entire time I listened to him when I was a federal agent. And I used to listen to him on stakeouts and all different kinds of things at night. Matter of fact, I was in Boise, Idaho, and I was at Gallon Field, which one part of it is sort of like Germany. You land there, there's a certain air base that you have like a civilian side and a military side. It was the same kind of thing. And so on Gallon Field, that was the night Art Bell, who was doing the show that Willie Strieber took over. It was called Dreamland. That was the night of the Phoenix flight. And so that was pretty interesting on how I think you, Art, and even George has broken things live in real time, just like they did the Phoenix flight. So I can't hate on any of you guys. There's real stuff that had to be talked about. And I remember one of the times I listened to you, I always thought you were and that's honestly, and I probably put you in a bad position. That's honestly why I had to ask you this question, because I thought, and I still think this, I think you're a real deal man trying to just get out the information that you know or you've heard. And it's not about editing yourself over politics. That wasn't where I was going with that. I was just saying about discussing topics that maybe were taboo.
Yes, thank
and
you.
Honestly,
yes, we appreciate your call, by the way.
All right. Yeah. No. Thank you. No. Again, as I say, I've never been told I couldn't talk about something. I've made guest suggestions and I've been told, well, we just had that person on, so we don't want to bring them back too soon, or for whatever reason, well, we've had that person on before, they really didn't work out well. That's about it. I get kind of editorial calls in terms of how to make the show better or what have you, but I've never been told you can't talk about this. It's actually quite the opposite. It's like Lisa will say to me things like, hey, loosen up, come on, of course you can talk about that. And I truly appreciate it. It's one of the things I love about the United States is the
freedom of speech, right?
The freedom of speech and how passionate they are about it. And I wish we were far more so up here.
Imagine if you would talk more candidly about some of the things that are on your mind on Coast to Coast AM. I'm sure you would get plenty of backlash. I mean, the things I say on here, and it's a small show, I get complaints all the time about myself.
Oh, you can't do a talk radio show without getting complaints. For me, and I suppose I could, go on there and talk politics, but I don't feel it's appropriate as a
Canadian citizen.
Yeah, it's like I'm a guest. I'm a guest host, and I'm an interloper. I'm a Canadian.
So you don't want to rub anyone the wrong way.
Well, I wouldn't appreciate, let's say, someone. Let's say, for example, on my Sunday night show, I have from time to time had guest hosts fill in for me, and one was an American, and I wouldn't appreciate it. I don't think my listeners would appreciate it if he were to come on from an American perspective and start, chiming in on Canadian politics. So that's just the approach that I take. That's just me. Now, on my own show and on my podcast, my politics are pretty well known, and I don't shy away from it. But to me, I own those shows; they're mine, and I feel I can do with them what I will.
Correct. I feel you on that. And Lilith in the chat room says Richard Syrett is the best of them all. Well, she says the best of them, but I'm sure she meant the best of them all.
Well, thank you, Lilith. That's very kind.
Yes, and I actually feel the same way. I think, well, not just because you're on the program and I'm talking to you in real time, I've always felt you were pretty much the closest thing to probably Art Bell.
That's high praise indeed. I appreciate that, Michael. As I say, though,
You have
I'm
your
not
own
Art
style,
Bell.
though. Yes, I know.
No one can
Sure.
replace Art Bell.
I'm with you on that. I've been compared to him as well. And I say, no, I'm sorry. I have my own style.
Exactly.
I respect him, but we have different styles, and art's in his own lane, in his own world.
100%. 100%.
And by the way, you mentioned Jimmy Church, and he stepped down. What do you make of that, Richard? I thought that was kind of bizarre.
I have no idea. I guess he's on to other projects, as far as I know.
Strange. It's just I thought he was doing so well on Coast. Everyone seemed to like him. So when he stepped down, I was just a bit surprised. I actually thought he might have been perhaps even someone that might even be considered for the main chair one day. But then again, Richard, I've always been on your side. I always thought, no, I think Richard truly deserves the main chair. If it ever happens, I think it's Richard, no one else. But that's just my opinion. I'm only being honest here.
Thank you. That's kind of you. George is not going anywhere, and I wish him many, many years. I hope he continues. But I really don't know what happened to Jimmy. He has his own radio show out of LA.
Right. He's doing his own thing.
On a podcast, and I think he does some television and so forth. I'm sure he's very busy.
Oh yeah. Why is everyone that has been involved in the radio industry, why is everyone trying to be a TV guy?
It pays better.
It just pays better.
That's part of it. Yeah. Well, in my case, and I think it's the same for a lot of broadcasters, it's not necessarily something you actively go looking for. It's a very strange business. You really can't go looking for it. You can't sort of just, unless you're blessed with all the things that I am not. I'm not a tall, dark, and handsome guy. I'm not leading man material. So unless you have those attributes, you're not going to go to Hollywood and just make it happen.
Get the lead role.
So
right.
People have to come to you. So I get approached by producers and people that are the heads of development at production companies wanting to do a project, and they tend to gravitate towards people in talk radio a lot. Number one, because you know what it's like. In live radio, you don't work with a script, so you've got to.
That's right.
You have to have your wits about you, and that requires a particular skill. It's not the same. Not to devalue people in television. I mean, they're working from a script, and that's and they have to lift those words off the page, which is a tremendous skill. But if they're looking to do something like reality TV or like a ghost hunter show or UFO type program, they're looking for people that can sort of speak extemporaneously and because there is no, reality TV is scripted a little bit, but it's primarily unscripted. That's called unscripted television. So they come looking for broadcasters, and that's the way it's always happened for me. I'll get an email and someone will pitch me on a show, and maybe we'll shoot a pilot, and maybe it goes somewhere, maybe it doesn't.
Hope for the best.
More often than not, and more often than not, it doesn't go anywhere. I've learned that over the years.
It's going to be hard to do the whole elevator pitch nowadays with COVID and everything going on. I was in consideration for a series recently, and that seems to be the holdup right now, is travel restrictions and COVID. Right.
So I'm sure that'll hopefully sometime after the election, I suspect things will change somewhat. That's a whole other kettle of fish, but I don't know if you want to go down that road.
Yeah,
but
in a second here,
think,
we will in a moment. Yeah. But I did want to just quickly ask you your opinion on female broadcasters. It seems like there really aren't any in the radio world. It seems like the best ones will make that transition to television.
Um, hmm, good question. This is going to sound strange, but I
Go ahead,
don't
Richard.
listen
Let it
to
rip. Go ahead.
I don't listen to a lot of radio. Um, Aside from, I listen to Coast, and when I'm not hosting it, I'm listening to it. Um, I would probably have some difficulty, compiling a list of male or female broadcasters these days. I don't listen to a lot of local radio here in Toronto. So, that may or may not be the case. I know a lot of I like to call them bloviators. These are the commentators, the talk radio hosts. There are a few women that I've heard, but a lot of them are. You're right. They're male. A lot of the political pundits are male. I think she's still doing radio. Laura Ingraham,
Right.
who's on Fox TV. I think she's a terrific broadcaster. Who else?
She's not very
Dana.
popular, though, for some odd reason.
I don't know what her numbers are like on Fox.
Well, on Fox, she's doing great, but in terms
Yeah.
of, radio, I'm not quite sure.
I
could
don't
be
know
wrong.
what her ratings are like, but yeah. Who else do I listen to?
Well,
of
good
course, we have two
yeah.
female, two women on Coast, Elisa and Connie. So
That's true. It's a rarity, in my opinion.
it may or may not be. I don't know. As I say, I don't listen to it enough to be able to tell you one way or the other.
Yeah, I was gonna also ask you. You don't really listen to anything on radio currently, right now, right?
Like I said, I listen to Coast. I listen to at night. We listen to Jim Bohannon as a conservative talk show host, and I listen to a lot of or watch a lot of YouTube. Dr. Steve Turley. Now that following the election in the U.S. pretty closely, I follow a YouTube channel called Red Politics, and I don't even know his real name. He's a young man, and he analyzes breaks it down sort of state by state, congressional seat by congressional seat. I enjoy politics. I love listening to those types of shows.
We're almost there, Richard. We're
US
almost
politics.
there.
Yeah.
We're almost there to that portion of the program, but one more before we wrap up Radio Talk here. And by the way, just to mention a female that was very popular, and I don't watch her show or anything, but I know this little fact about her, Rachel Maddow. She was actually a broadcaster before she made the transition to television. That's kind of the example I was trying to throw out there in my mind. So not very many, but the best,
Maddow on MSNBC.
the best ones always make that jump. But
yeah, I suppose. Yeah, Sean Hannity is primarily radio, and then
I don't even know how that guy does it. By the way, radio and a popular
he's
TV
working
show.
Around the clock. I don't know either. I don't know either.
The man's a workhorse, and I don't even like Sean Hannity, but I respect him as a broadcaster.
Sure.
Nothing but respect for Sean Hannity. And now, as we wrap up the Radio Talk discussion here, Richard, I got to ask you this. If SiriusXM approached you, would you make the jump? And it's an exclusive contract away from Coast and away from the podcast and away from everything. It's just SiriusXM, and it's a 7-figure contract, maybe even more. Would you do it? Be honest.
Well, yeah. I mean, I have to be sensible. I mean,
there we go.
I love Coast to Coast, but it's if I were given an opportunity to do something full time for that kind of money, I mean, I have a family.
Hell yeah. It's expensive.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. But that I don't see that on the horizon.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed there. Never know. So, Richard, as you know by now, the world has been at a standstill these past several months. We are currently seeing a meteoric rise on COVID cases in the United States and around the world. the UK is also preparing to go on yet again another lockdown, another shelter-in-place session. And Richard, what is the scene out there in Canada?
Well, cases are on the rise. In Ontario, we're hovering around 900, 1,000 cases a day, and the media reports them every day as if cases are infections, which they are not. The COVID test has a lot of problems.
Right.
We know about the false positives. We know that if your T cells destroy the coronavirus, the test will pick up the remnants of that virus. It amplifies the virus so that it can detect it, so that if you have a very low viral load, such that you would be totally asymptomatic, it will register as a positive. So, and of course, they don't break this down. All we hear are there are 900 cases. So it's time to lock down. It's time to shutter restaurants again. It's time to shutter indoor gyms. And this, to me, is just a very bad policy. Cases do not equal infections, even in the United States. Mortalities are down. Hospitalizations are down. And there are some hot spots here and there in the U.S. But I think we have now enough indication from countries that have tried lockdowns, tried to wear masks, tried to institute these types of policies. The virus does what it wants to do. You have Sweden, where no masks, no lockdown, children in schools, and they seem to have it under control. In other words, the virus is going to do what it wants to do, and this self-inflicted wound that we're suffering in Canada, our Liberal government here has placed us in $1 trillion in debt. They have spent 2 years worth of an entire federal budget in 1 year, $500 billion, and my great-great-grandchildren will be paying that off.
That's true.
It's absolute insanity. What's happening, and I'm very disappointed in the way that the mainstream media is simply carrying water for governments in provincial, municipal, federal government in Canada. Even the opposition parties are not pushing back; they're just kind of going along with this, and it's the abuse of civil liberties. I had a constitutional lawyer on my radio show last night talking about this, and he's launched a civil case.
Yeah.
Rocco Galati, who I think is just doing tremendous work, but he's one lone voice crying in the wilderness. Where are the civil liberties associations? Where are the opposition parties raising a hue and a cry? They're none to be found. Everyone is just rolling over on this, and it's very disturbing and very disheartening.
He was animated last night.
Oh, you heard it? Yes,
I heard
yes,
a few
he
minutes.
was.
Yeah,
Indeed.
I loved it.
Yes, he was.
It was good, and I understand people are frustrated. I understand people want this to be over. Unfortunately, a virus doesn't go away because of your feelings. That's just not the way it works. That's the unfortunate truth. And I'm frustrated too. I hate wearing the mask. I think it's silly. I see people driving alone in their car and they're wearing a mask, Richard.
Yeah, that I don't know when I see that whether I'm amused or disappointed or a little bit of both, I suppose. But that's what fear does, right? It's a great motivator, and unfortunately, I think that is in large measure what is being done here. That this is something that is being weaponized. Not that there isn't a virus out there, and it is unfortunately killing people that have, in most cases, the vast majority of cases, 2, 3, or even 4 comorbidities. These are very vulnerable people. Every death diminishes us all, but it is being used as cover for some other means. I'm not sure exactly what that is, whether it's the Great Reset we've been hearing about from the World Economic Forum. Governments, they they are synthetic beasts. They exist to grow and to multiply. They're almost like a virus themselves.
That's true.
Bureaucracies and so forth. And so it's just kind of it's human nature, I guess. When that old saying, "You never let a good crisis go to waste." Well, here's a crisis, and they are certainly seizing upon it for whatever end. I'm not sure. I have some ideas, but nothing that could be proved definitively. But this is not just about a virus.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And to round the table yet again here, Quebec and Manitoba and Winnipeg, it seems like all these places are headed for another lockdown. Health experts are concerned about the quote-unquote third wave, so restaurants will be shut down shortly. I'm not sure if it's already happened, but that's the last thing I read, Richard.
Yeah, well, here in Ontario, we're in a modified stage 2. I'm living in an area called York Region. And actually, the York Regional Council was to meet today to determine, when they're going to open things up again. Restaurants are closed for dining in, gyms, I believe, and other types of, there are other restrictions in place. So I'm guessing that they'll probably kick the can down the road and extend it for another 30 days. I don't know. They may have already decided to do something different. I haven't heard. But again, even in these other, in Quebec and these other places, we're talking about cases. We're talking about, positive tests. The more people you test, the more cases you're going to have. But they're not infections. Some of them are. And to me, again, the overreach and the reaction has been completely overblown. It's interesting, and Rocco Galati pointed this out on my show last night. There are no flu cases.
No flu cases, right? He did say that.
Right, which and I've heard similar things down in the United States. Now, normally this time of year, we would have tens of thousands of flu cases. We would have some deaths attributed to the flu.
Right.
And so I'm just wondering if they're rolling all of those flu cases into COVID cases.
Yes. And by the way, do you get a flu shot?
No, I don't.
Good. I'm glad you don't.
Yeah. I don't. No, I would never. I certainly wouldn't try and talk someone out of it if they felt that
Sure.
that's what they should do. But for me, and I'm not an anti-vaxxer entirely. I am seriously contemplating getting the shingles vaccine. I had chickenpox late in life, and
no kidding.
So I'm susceptible to shingles. And my mother was 95. She had it a couple years ago.
Oh my!
It was fairly mild, a mild case, but for someone of her age, it was kind of problematic, and it's not something I want to go through, later on in life.
That's
so
pretty.
I might consider that.
Yeah.
I might consider the shingles vaccine.
That's pretty extraordinary. Richard, how old were you when you got the chicken pox?
I think I was around 37, 38.
Oh my gosh! So you were like a full adult, and oh no, Richard. Poor Richard. Now I feel so bad for you having to deal with all that nonsense.
Lots of oatmeal baths. Oh, it wasn't too bad.
Poor Richard. The science, this is what the science says. Well, and I'm going with the science here for a moment. The coronavirus is no ordinary flu. Anything with an HIV homology is nothing you should want to flirt with. Now, Richard, you're a smart man. We both aren't kids. I know. I don't know what your immune system looks like, and I doubt mine is bulletproof either. Would you have enough money to cover your medical bills if, in fact, you do contract the virus?
Well, for all I know, I may have already had it.
You think you've already had it?
My immune system is pretty good. Even at my advanced age, I take pretty good care of myself. I eat very well. I take lots of supplements and I take long walks. I can't remember the last time I was sick. I had some bronchial pneumonia a few years ago, probably 6-7 years ago. So aside from that,
you're good.
I do not worry.
Okay.
I wash my hands, fastidiously. I I'm careful. But I've always been that way. I've always been not a germaphobe, but I've always, we it's pretty easy to avoid. You wash your hands, and yeah, if you can't physically distance, and you wear the mask, I suppose. But I don't know how effective it is. The science is all over the place
It's a
on
little up and
that.
down. I agree.
Yeah, yeah.
I just worry when researchers warn that some COVID-19 vaccines could increase the risk of HIV infection. So when I read something like that, I think, well, why the hell would why would anybody want this virus if it has anything having to deal with HIV in it? And furthermore, I had also heard and read multiple articles about the flu shot also making you susceptible to COVID-19 infection.
Well, I've read that as well because
Yes, sir.
a lot of the flu vaccines, I guess, they'll use animal tissue, dog tissue, and they're full of coronavirus. So I don't know if that's true or not. Um, I've talked to John Rappaport about that, and he's a pretty respected health reporter,
He definitely
medical
has his own
reporter.
views, that's for sure.
Yeah, and
Oh yeah.
he certainly seems to think, based on his research, that that's the case. That a lot of the coronavirus infections in northern Italy uh, could have been attributed to the flu vaccine, but I can't say for sure one way or the other.
Yeah, that's the problem. This is so new. No one actually knows for sure. But I can say this. I actually like a few things this pandemic has brought forth, Richard. And I'll be honest, I've learned many things during this entire experience, and I still am learning from all of these things. One of those things that I truly like is the social distancing rule. Richard, I always dislike people getting way too close to me in line. I never liked that. People close to my face talking to me, Richard, man or woman. I just never liked that.
Well, yeah, your personal space is one thing, but I, I will never ever embrace this idea of the new normal. I don't want the new
Yes,
normal.
I don't either.
We've been shaking hands for 3,000 years, and I intend to go back to shaking hands as soon as there's a willing partner who's says, oh no, we're good for that. We can
Yeah.
shake hands. That's fine. I have no problem with that. I want to go back to the old normal, and as soon as possible. I like the old normal. Um, I'm not the most gregarious person in the world. I work from home and in my little studio beneath the stairs, but I do crave from time to time some human interaction. And we are not a species that is meant to be, locked down and locked away and isolated in this way. And we are creating some long-term, I think, psychological, emotional, spiritual wounds with our approach.
Yes.
And you know, I've said it many times, but it was apparent to me as early as March that the prescription was far worse than the disease.
And Richard, since we're talking about the vaccine as well, as you know, it's been mutating. Do you feel comfortable taking the vaccine?
I don't know that there could be a vaccine if they haven't isolated the virus. And again, that there's some conflicting reports on that. I know that a team from Sunnybrook Hospital claimed that they isolated it. Rocco Galati, who is a lawyer, and he's read this very carefully. He says, well, that's what the headline says, but if you actually drill down, no, they haven't isolated it. So there are these two camps: one that insists that they have, and the other that insists that they haven't. And if they haven't, then if they haven't identified it, isolated it, and replicated it, pretty hard to develop a vaccine.
And don't worry about the keys being played in the background. They can't hear that, by the way, Richard.
Okay, good.
Don't worry. So yes,
My boy's hard at work upstairs with their piano lesson.
yes, you're doing a good job. And the race for a viable vaccine has been underway. Multiple people have died during the early trial. And I'm perturbed by the fact that this vaccine will be used on senior citizens first. I feel like they are being used as the sacrificial lamb, Richard.
I'm no doubt that they will, once there is a vaccine, that they will, yeah, they'll try to push it on seniors. Again, they'll
Right.
use the fear factor. Uh, they, they won't stop. They'll utilize coercion, anything they can do. There's talk of a vaccine passport. If you don't have a vaccine and
That's
it's
right.
not stamped in your passport, you can't get on a plane. I really, I hope people, rise up in unison and engage in some civil disobedience and put a stop to this nonsense.
I'm not overly optimistic about a tangible vaccine, as we had just talked about the COVID 19 mutating, and it's been mutating for I don't know how long now. And it makes me think, Richard, that perhaps they're going to use COVID the same way they use the flu, where it seems like every 5 to 7 months we're going to have to start getting vaccinated all over again, since no one really knows how long you'll be immune once you do take the shot.
All good questions. No, I doubt very much that they'll.
You know how big pharma is. There's no money in for a cure.
No, that's true. That's true. I'm not sure. In terms of it mutating, I know I'm hearing that. I'm not convinced.
You're
They
not
keep saying,
convinced.
"Oh, we're in a second wave and a third
You
wave."
don't buy
I
it.
don't see.
You think it's
No,
all
I'm not buying it.
bullshit.
Well, I don't see.
It's okay to say
I
so.
Yeah,
It's
I
okay.
don't see the data that would suggest that we are in a second wave, let alone a third wave here in Ontario. Anyway, I can't speak about what's happening in Europe, but here in Ontario,
Yeah.
again, we're talking about cases, not infections, not people on ice, in ICU or on respirators or people dying. Um, the data simply doesn't back that up. And epidemiologists I'm following and reading do not see it intensifying. If it is mutating, they don't see it mutating in that way that it's becoming more deadly. If anything, it seems to be petering out,
Understood.
which
And
is the way many viruses behave.
it's true. And I'm just curious, what's your take on journalism over the last 4 years?
It's gone.
I knew
Uh,
you'd say
at,
that.
at, at at least in terms of the mainstream media, they have totally lost the thread. They have doubled down and tripled down and quadrupled down uh, because they realize they've lost the room. Uh, they have lost all credibility. I mean, there are a few good ones out there, but I'm speaking in generalities
Yes,
here.
sir.
And I see the rise of the citizen journalist and small independent organizations as our salvation, really. Uh, as for the CNNs and the MSNBCs and the CBCs, they are fast approaching irrelevance if they're not there already. I know people that have YouTube channels that have bigger audiences, and they will, their business model is failing, deservedly so, and hopefully they will be replaced by these small, hungry, independent news services. And so good riddance, I say.
I love that. But yes, just to clarify things for the newer listeners just jumping in here, in case they are, you're not an anti-vaxxer. I just want to throw that out there.
No, I would take it case by case. I think the vaccine schedule that is recommended for children is over the top. I know in the United States, it's even worse in terms of the number of vaccines on the schedule and the timing of the vaccines. And every year they keep adding more and more and more to the schedule. No, I'm not an anti-vaxxer,
Yes.
but um, I need to be sold on its efficacy and its safety
I'm with
before I'd
you.
be willing to consider it.
And before we move on to the election here, do you have any opinion on Dr. Fauci and what he said in terms of returning back to, I guess, normal? It won't happen until 2022, he says.
Yeah, I think his time is up. Um, I think he got into trouble very early on in the game when, like a lot of doctors, he was kind of chasing his own tail. Masks are ineffective. Don't wear a mask. Sure, wear a mask. Go ahead. No, you must wear a mask. I think he's lost the room as well.
Well, there's reports that he might be fired if Trump is elected.
Well, he mentioned Trump. Someone in the at the rally, I think it was in Florida, kind of shouted out "Fire Fauci," and Trump said, "I'll consider it maybe after the election."
And by the way, I think I do have a clip of Fauci talking about the mask. Well, I thought I did. Oh, wait, I do. Here we go, Richard.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is. And often there are unintended consequences. People keep fiddling with the mask and they keep touching their face.
And can you get some smutz sort of staying inside there?
Of course. But when you think masks, you should think of healthcare providers.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah, so that's a little odd. And Richard, here is that clip of the Fire Fauci.
Rounding the turn. I say it drives them crazy. It's rounding the turn. Because all they want to do, you turn on the news, COVID. Would like to talk about COVID, and then next year, here's what happens, November 4th. You won't hear too much about it.
That was pretty loud.
Yeah, a lot of enthusiasm.
Don't tell anybody, but let me wait till a little bit after the election. I appreciate the advice.
So obviously, Trump supporters are very, very rowdy and excited. And Joe Biden, his supporters, they're, well, I'm not so sure.
No, there's virtually no enthusiasm for Joe Biden.
None.
He's kind of he's a placeholder, and so the Democrats, unfortunately, are in a position where they're not voting for Joe Biden; they're voting against somebody. So when you're in that situation, you're not really motivated. When you're not voting for someone, you're voting against them. That's not a great motivator in terms of getting out to the polls. And I think that's ultimately going to be the undoing of the Democrats in this election.
That's right.
I could be wrong, but that's my sense of it.
As you're fully aware, my country faces quite the choice, and the stakes are much higher this time, Richard. The results will no doubt define this country's next generation, as well as yours, most likely.
Oh, no question. This is the most important election in the United States probably since 1861. The stakes are that high.
It's pretty wild. And I'm in California. I'm not a registered Democrat or belong to any political party. I prefer being a lone wolf, to be honest.
Yeah. So you're an independent.
Correct.
Right.
Yes, but I like to stick with facts, and I just never really liked the Democratic Party.
Well, they're not your dad's Democratic Party or your granddad's Democratic Party. This is not the party of Hubert Humphrey or even Jack Kennedy. This is, there is just simply no common ground between the Republicans and Bill Clinton was a tax cutter. Jack Kennedy was a tax cutter. The Democratic Party is unrecognizable, as far as I can see.
And Richard, of course, if you were living in America, I assume you would probably be voting for Trump.
Yes, I can say that with 100% certainty.
Well, I'm glad you're honest. Most people are afraid to even admit that.
Well, that's the other interesting thing, and that's why when you look at the polls in the United States, and you have polls showing Biden up by 8% or 10%. I saw one poll that had him up 16 or 17% in Pennsylvania, and then you contrast that with the rallies. It's like, well, don't believe your lying eyes, right? All of the metrics or the indicators, aside from these media polls, point to, I think, a Trump landslide. Now, that may come back and bite me in the ass tomorrow.
Right. You never know.
But you mentioned, you were referring to something called the shy voter syndrome.
Yeah.
And the only poll that has sort of figured that out is the Trafalgar Group, and they ask people very cleverly. You don't ask someone who they're voting for; you ask them who their neighbor's voting for. And so the Trafalgar poll was one of the few that got it right in 2016. And I think all the media polls, the ABC, the CNN polls, they're making the same mistakes that they did in 2016. And at least that's what I'm counting on. And that those polls, they're not reaching the Trump voters. Number one, they don't answer the phone.
There's
Number
a phone
two,
right there.
they're too busy. They're working. Or number three, they're not going to answer honestly because of a social acceptance bias or whatever they call that. They're afraid to be doxxed. They don't want to identify themselves as a Trump voter.
Yes, and we were talking about the psychological effects of COVID-19, but there's also been psychological effects during this whole election. Going back to 2016, we've seen all kinds of people have these mental breakdowns. We're seeing this today. We're seeing people quit. They're quitting completely, talking to their neighbors or friends or family members over who they're voting for.
It's tragic. It's I call it a non-shooting civil war. Instead of pitting North against South, it's family member against family member.
That's interesting. Don't you think that's kind of bizarre? It kind of has me perturbed as well. I'm not sure what it says about my country and society.
Well, I think we all are maybe a little guilty of ceding too much emotional space to politics. I think we have to relearn some of the social graces and the idea that you can disagree about politics and still be civil and friendly.
I agree.
I have probably most of my friends are of the liberal persuasion. I'm not going to unfriend them because of that.
Yeah.
And if they take offense because of my political views and they decide that they're going to walk away, well, that's sad. But
it's quite sad.
Yeah, it's just politics, folks. Now, granted, there's a lot at stake here, a lot at stake. I think the future of the United States is in the balance here. If we go down, one road leading to socialism and Marxism and anarchy on the one hand, and or the other choice, I think, is continued prosperity, the resurgence of the nation state, which is I think the right direction. But I would love to see a viable, Democratic Party as an alternative. Having a one-party system is not healthy, and I suspect if in fact there is a red landslide, that maybe that will be what is necessary to provide the Democrats sufficient motivation to sort of engage in some serious, in-depth self-evaluation about how far they've drifted away. They are now the party of big tech, Silicon Valley, Wall Street. They are not the party of, the middle class. They're not the party of the worker, the laborer. They've lost that constituency, and the United States needs a minimum of two parties. So it distresses me. I don't take glee in seeing the demise of the Democratic Party.
Understood. And I think everyone can agree with what you just said. You were spot on with your analysis there. And furthermore, it's just odd seeing people judge others because of their political party. But as you said, this is a very different party. And again, Richard, this is a fine example of what happens when major companies become bigger than than government.
Well, that's certainly, part of it. That's nothing new.
Is it? Yeah.
Corporations and their influence over the political process. But corporations are people.
But we've never seen it like
really.
this, though. I mean, with Google, I mean, they are titans now. Amazon, it seems like they are running the show.
Yeah, big tech this is an existential threat to democracy. Never mind Russia. The real political and election interference is happening. You're right, with big tech, Facebook, and censoring a political discourse.
That's right. When corporations become bigger than government, Richard, that's what we are seeing right now in 2020, and that will continue until we are both dead.
Well, or unless the next president pulls a Teddy Roosevelt, a la Standard Oil, and smashes some of these companies into 1,000 pieces.
We'll have to wait and find out, Richard.
Yes, we will. We won't have long to wait.
Yes, and Richard, as we come to a close here, is there anything that you think that we should have covered that wasn't?
You know what? I think the only two stories, and they're somewhat intertwined, are COVID and the U.S. election. These are monumental stories, and I'm glad that we had a chance to talk about them.
Me too. Well, Richard, I really enjoyed our conversation. I know your listeners will really enjoy this episode as you opened up and talked very openly. I know my listeners will really enjoy this. Especially those that listen on the podcast and that drive around. They really like that. And my goodness, this was a great episode again, and I really do appreciate your honesty. I think you're a tremendous show host. I enjoy your show greatly, and I wish you all the very best in all your future endeavors, and wish you and your family perfect health. And we shall talk again. Mr. Syrett, thank you so much. I want you to be safe out there, and let the kids know that we couldn't hear them playing piano, even though I wish we could.
All right. Thank you, Michael. And I'll just remind people they can go to strangeplanet.ca. Strangeplanet.ca. Everything is right there. All the show info on my radio program, my podcast, my YouTube channel. They can subscribe to my newsletter, strangeplanet.ca.
Very nice. Once again, thank you so much, Richard. I will talk to you on the other side, my friend.
Okay, Michael. All the best. Thank you.
Hang tight, and mahalo. And there he goes, boys and girls, the one and only Mr. Richard Syrett. And I want to thank all of you out there for being here this evening. It was fun. I want to thank all of you in the chat room. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. And of course, don't forget, if you are a fan or I guess a newer listener and appreciate the show and like what you just heard, and you want bonus material, please direct yourself to patreon.com/Michael Decon, and that is where you'll find bonus material. International listeners out there, thank you so much for your support as well. Love hearing from all of you out there, and we will return very soon. Stay safe, everyone, no matter where you are on this island Earth. I'm Michael Decon, and with that said, the world is a mysterious place, and life itself is a mystery. Until next time, good night, everybody.